it on? All right, the green light is on. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but not through the microphone.
Not through the microphone.
Yes.
Should I talk loudly? Oh, there we go. Okay. Awesome. Well, good morning. How are y'all?
Hi, Lydia.
Hi. My name is Lydia, and I am from Texas, so I say y'all. And I am here to talk to you guys about hospitality. So one of my favorite experiences of hospitality was a time when I was in Nicaragua. So I had gone on some short-term trips to Nicaragua previously and gotten to know this gal named Evelyn. And then I did an internship in Nicaragua after I graduated from college. And so I had the opportunity to get to know her on a more personal level and a more day-to-day kind of friendship way. And eventually it got to the point where she felt comfortable inviting me to her home for dinner. And I was really excited. I had done that before in Texas and in Virginia where I went to college, inviting my friends over for meals, and they would invite me over. So it was pretty normal, and I didn't really think anything of it. So when I went to her house, though, I realized just how radical her hospitality was. On the outside, Emily's house looks nice for the area. It was made of cinder block, which was a good building material for that region. But when I went inside, I noticed it was really dark, and the floor was dirt. And she showed me her room, and the door to her room was a sheet, like a bed sheet. And so it was a very humble living situation, and she kind of apologized for that. But nonetheless, she welcomed me into her space and cooked for me the traditional dish there, which is beans and rice. It's called gallo pinto. And I got to meet her family, I got to meet her mom, and she just, as soon as I walked in the door, just gave me this big hug and just said, "Bienvenida, welcome," and gave me a kiss on the cheek, which is what the custom is there. And I just felt so welcome. I felt so at home. Even though I was in a different country and a different space, I just felt like I was part of their family. And so that was one of my favorite experiences of hospitality. Today, in the text that we just read, we hear a story of cross-cultural hospitality as well. Paul and his team were coming from a different region and experienced some hospitality. Before I go into talking about the passage, I want to give you guys a little bit of background so you know kind of what's going on in this story. So Acts, for some of you know this, and some of you may be new, Acts is a story of the early church, the first church. So Jesus came to earth, lived, died, and rose again. And then when he ascended, his disciples continued to gather and meet. And then through various works of the Holy Spirit among them, their church began to grow. And so then they began to send out people from their church to go to other regions and share about Jesus. And so this was the group that we see here in this story is Paul, who was one of the main preachers of this early church, and Silas, who was a leader from Jerusalem. And then along the way, they pick up someone named Timothy. So something important to know about Timothy is that he was in a sense what we might call today biracial. So he had one parent, his mom was Jewish, and his dad was Gentile or not Jewish. And in that day, there was a very big distinction. It was very important. If you were a Jew, there were certain people you could not interact with. There were certain people you could eat with and you could not eat with, right? And so he had this biracial heritage. So he was a part of their team as well. And so as this team is going, you can bring up the map. I don't know if you have that on there. As the team was traveling, they just kept sharing the gospel in different cities, and they reached a point in Acts 16, just before our passage, where they discerned together that the Holy Spirit was not allowing them to go into that province of Asia, but they sensed a call to Macedonia, which is farther north, and you see in the top left of the screen. And so they decided to go around Asia and go up into Macedonia, and that's where they reached Philippi. And when they arrived in Philippi, it says they stayed there several days. And I thought this was interesting. They were gathering their bearings a bit, right, and trying to discern what God was up to in this region. I'm sure that they noticed that the majority religion there was polytheism, so they worshiped many gods. And they were trying to find people that were worshiping the God of Israel, because that was who they wanted to share with first. but they couldn't find them in the city, and so they had to go outside of the city by a river, which was a place of prayer. And back in those days, it took 10 Jewish men to comprise a synagogue. And so if you didn't have 10 Jewish men gathering together worshiping God in the synagogue, then the custom was to meet by a river. And so here in the story, we actually don't see men mentioned. It's just women, and they're by the river worshiping God. And so Paul and his companions are trying to find those people that are seeking God, that are ready to hear about Jesus. And so they go outside the city to this place of prayer. And when they come there, they find one of the women who's listening. Her name is Lydia, and she was from Thyatira, which I don't know if you guys can see on the map. It's kind of small, but right under Asia, there's a city called Thyatira. So she's actually from that region that they were not supposed to go to. And conveniently enough, she's over there in Philippi where they're called to go. And so she is a businesswoman as well. Thyatira was known for selling purple cloth and purple garments. And so it makes sense that that was what she was doing. She was a businesswoman, and she was she was living in a different region, so she was an international businesswoman. And it seems like since she had her own house, she was probably well off financially. So here she is, this businesswoman, probably well off financially, but instead of being in the center of the city, which is where probably her peers were, right, where like the action and the activity of the city was, she's out there on the margins of the city. She's out on the outskirts of the city, probably meeting with other people who were not as financially well off. And she's out there. Why is she out there? Why did she have to leave the city and go out to the margins? Because that's where she could encounter God.